This Labor Notes Conference to welcome the insurgent teachers from West Virginia.
I would love to tell you that we have a really militant unions and they were really revved up and everything was like, but no. The only time I feel like people even thought about unions is when there was a problem, right? I'm going to file a grievance, I'm going to go to my union. Other than that, I don't think there was really very little discussion about unions, like at all. At our local meeting, for instance, we'd usually have about 10 people show up every month. So really not thinking about the unions at all. As Ellen said, it's a weird dynamic. So in any school, you could have, down my hallway for instance, NEA members, AFT members, people who were not members of any union. So it led to some weird things, because if you talk about your union meeting, it might just be certain people at your school. It didn't involve everyone. So a lot of times we would meet, we didn't really have school union meetings, we're meeting in other places.
I am from the southernmost part of West Virginia, which actually borders Kentucky. And as he said, it was the same way in our area. The unions have pretty much just laid dormant for several years. The only time that you heard from anyone was when there was some kind of problem. It was RIF and transfer season. Just that. Other than that, basically, we were lucky if we had 5 to 7 people to turn out each time. But every time someone had a problem, they usually did come to me and they would ask what they needed to do, union or non-union. I went ahead and I helped them with that. But other than that, any type of strong union environment within our schools, it didn't exist, for fear of retaliation, for one. And another, you just had people that they thought, no matter what we do, they're not going to listen to us. And that, to me, seems to be, or had been, the attitude that was expressed around the state by the majority of our people, because we hadn't had a raise in several years. I think maybe 20 or so. And
oh my God.
The only perk to that was we had great insurance. So that kind of compensated for the low wages, which made us 48th in the nation. So then they start trying to mess with our insurance on top of the pay being so low, and then that's kind of what sparked it all. And it wasn't until that point that everyone decided, we're fed up. When I first began teaching in 2012, the insurance, in my opinion, was excellent, because I had worked for 1 year in Kentucky and I knew that their premiums were, although they were being paid $5,000 to $7,000 more per year than we were, then they still had to pay much more for their insurance. So it balanced out. However, after the first year or two that I was there, then was when they started coming at us with the tax on our insurance. First of all, the premiums, we started to see slight increases, for one. And another was they enforced this Healthy Tomorrows policy. So the next thing you know, we get a paper in the mail that says, you have to go to a doctor by such and such date. It must be reported. Your blood glucose levels must be at a certain amount. Your waist size must be a certain amount. And if it is not, and you don't meet all these stipulations, then you get a $500 penalty on your out-of-pocket deductible. So luckily for me, I eat everything I want, but I was healthy. My wife, on the other hand, who eats much better than I do, salads almost every meal, has high cholesterol, so she gets that $500 slapped on her just like that. Okay, so that was how they started out. In the meantime, we have been filling these out for a year or two, and they keep saying, you know, you have to go back every year and be checked. And then comes the event that awoke the sleeping giant. The PEIA board, which is our public employee insurance agency that represents the state of West Virginia, it's just a board of 4 to 5 individuals that are appointed by the governor. They're not elected, they have no one that they answer to, they just come up with these things on their own. So they come to us and they say, we're raising your premiums. This was somewhere between November and December of this past year. We're raising your premiums. You're going to now be enrolled in a program called Go 365, which means that you have to wear a Fitbit, and you have to also as well, you have to record all of your steps, you have to check in with them, and it included private questions like how much sexual activity do you perform in a week, is it vigorous, all of these things that they wanted us to report on our personal lives, and that was all included, okay? In addition to that, we had to report all those things, and if we refused to wear that Fitbit, record all of our steps, or if we didn't make our steps, we were going to be charged an additional $25 per month. So when everyone sees this, along with the increased premiums, then they've also introduced a couple more bills to go along with that, because the PEIA board, they have the final say. Whatever they do, it's not voted upon by the legislature. It is basically just law once they decide it. But in the meantime, we had our legislator, which were presenting these bills. We were currently on a plan of 80-20 that we were paying out of pocket. Well, they had proposed a bill that would double that and make us pay 60-40. So they presented that along with charter school bills and a couple other things that were just direct attacks on us. We had been going by a process of seniority for several years, and they also introduced a bill to eliminate seniority to where it was up to the superintendent whether or not you got to stay in your position. It was up to the principal, and regardless if you were there 30 years or you were there for your first or your second year, they were trying to tell us, you know, just up to your principal. They decide, superintendent decides, they don't want you to go. You've been here for 30 years. If you've got a master's degree plus 45 hours, you're gone. It's up to them. Your seniority no longer matters. So those things combined with the insurance is actually what got this movement going in our state.
So in November and December, every year they have these PEIA hearings where they want to hear what the people who are going to be on PEIA think about it, and then they'll change it, you know, if they want to. So usually at these hearings, I hadn't been to any of them, but I know that a few of the people on the panel with me have been to the ones in the years past, and maybe a few, 20 people show up, and then they just, you know, tell these sob stories about how the insurance has affected them, and the panel just sits up there staring, twiddling their thumbs, and then they go along with it anyway, and people don't know until July 1st when it hits them. This year was different because we had the Facebook group. The Facebook group was created by Jay and Emily, and people started talking about it. Public employees as well as teachers, because public employees were affected by it as well. The Go 365 was when a lot of people started joining the Facebook group, and they were just kind of rumbling and talking about, this is really invasive, this is weird, I can't believe they're sending this to me. And they posted pictures of the things that they were getting in the mail. And then that way, instead of throwing the seemingly junk mail in the trash, people were starting to open it and see, oh, this is something that I have to do. And also, what Brandon didn't mention was the total household income on top of that. So they were saying what we're going to do is we are going to take spouse's income as well as your income, and we're going to combine them, and that's what we're going to base your premiums and out-of-pocket deductibles from. So that took people from a lower bracket into a higher bracket, and then they made 10 brackets to 3. So people were having to pay double a month what they were paying, sometimes triple a month what they were paying. So then it shrunk down to 5 from the hearings. They were like, okay, we'll give you 5. But that, of course, wasn't enough. And it was just a slap in the face. Every single time, you know, the Go 365, they were going to give you gift cards to Target. If you know, Walmart, to Walmart, if you got your, if you reached your different steps every month. And so people were talking about that on the Facebook page and just kind of enraged by it all. And they were like, what are we going to do about this? And does that...
It included the children as well.
It included the children as well. Yeah, if they worked and they were on the, and they were being covered by the insurance, they also had to, that income was, or if you had double jobs, like if you had 2 jobs, that income was also factored onto it.
Yeah. So part of taking that anger and really disillusionment and channeling it into meaningful action, what came from a small group of organizers who belong to different unions across different schools. We basically let people know that our target was the legislature. So the PEIA board didn't really have the power to raise revenue. The legislature had the power to raise revenue. And we were very effective at getting that message out through the Facebook group, but we started organizing actions. We would show up to any events where there were legislators, and we started doing bird dogging. We started confronting them directly and saying, what are you going to do to find the funding for PEIA? Basically we put those videos in the Facebook group, and people got even angrier, but then they started emailing. I don't know what else. Okay. Yeah, so once people started emailing, we said, hey, this senator just said, well, we have to keep our priorities straight, and it's not a priority, your healthcare is not a priority, basically, and we have this video of him saying that, and that inflamed everyone across all 55 counties who were in the Facebook group, and we said, here's his email address, and so then he would get, and then people started posting screenshots of those emails, and the responses that they would get from that senator, and then they would say, wait, I'm gonna email my senator, like, how do I even know who my senator is? And so we started posting links to the website, the state website where you can find your senator, and we just kind of launched a campaign to do that. We had many campaigns along the way that targeted that anger into, specific actions just in the right direction. We didn't get anywhere for a while. That took months, really. Yeah, people started making, and people knew who the really bad legislators were, so people would start making memes about those legislators, and they would go after them harder, and then they would say, well, this particular delegate or senator, this isn't working out, I'm going to try this one. This one's also in my district. And people started, at that point, sort of organizing themselves to figure out, okay, who's on this Facebook group anyway? Like, what counties do we have represented? I'm in Kanawha County, I'm in Jackson County, I'm in Mingo County, like, who's in Pocahontas County or who's in this county, like write your name if you are, and then we, you know, just somebody, I don't even know who did that. I think somebody in Jackson County did that.
By the way, our county was the first to vote to go out. But it actually was not our idea. Our neighboring county of Wyoming came to me and said, you know, we're talking about a sick out, a flu out, what be it. But she said we're going to have this event that we're going to name Fed Up Friday, where we're just not going to show up. And so she told me this like a week and a half in advance, and she says we're going to vote on it soon. So I immediately called an emergency meeting for all of our people to come to, and I invited our Senator Ojeda, and as well as a couple local board members and people from the House of Delegates. And I got up and basically told them about Go 365, some of the bills that weren't being publicized that were out there that they were waiting to bring before us, kind of keeping them in secret. So I informed them, and that night we had our local union leaders there, and it was my understanding that from the state level of our unions that we were being encouraged to sit back a while because it was too close to, or it wasn't close enough to the end of the session, okay? They were afraid if we got started early, we went out on strike, then we would end up being out for 2, 3, 4 weeks with no pay. So they wanted us to send emails, and they encouraged us to do various things. But my people wouldn't have it. That night, they wouldn't have it. And although our reps were there and they were like, we can't really tell you what to do, but then they were kind of behind the scenes like, well, this might be too early. Finally, I stood up and I said, you know what? I represent you. What you tell me to do is what we will do in this county. Do we participate in Fed Up Friday? Do we have a motion? And they all stand up and everybody's hands go up and I say, okay, Fed Up Friday it is. And the very next day, Wyoming County did the same thing. But like I said, it was their idea. I just kind of beat them to the punch. And from there, we just had one after the other who joined us.
And my name is Nicole McCormick. I'm from Mercer County, which is a neighbor of some of these guys. But that is true. I mean, that was the first thing. We noticed the word strike being thrown around on the Facebook group. We think January 6th is what Jay says he thinks he's nailed it down to. And whenever that we had these in-person discussions, people were like, I don't have a savings. You know, I can't afford anything. I can't afford to leave. And even though that's absolutely true, we don't make enough to have savings, and most of us barely make it payday to payday, really like 3 days before payday. But we realized, and we started discussing our leverage. There are 727 classrooms that are not being filled with certified teachers. And on top of that, if the secretary's gone one day, it goes to hell. If there's not enough aides for the cooks, there's not enough aides for the bus drivers. If more than one teacher, maybe two, is out in a school, we don't have enough substitutes. So they're cramming kids in classrooms that don't need to be there, which does not make for an effective educational experience. So we recognize that. We recognized that leverage that we had, and we started having these discussions of how were we going to convince everyone that it was the right thing to do. Because, as was said, you don't have to belong to any specific organization. So we have WVEA members, AFT members, WVSSPA members, which is our service personnel organization, and a lot of non-members. So we decided that everyone should have a voice. Every single person, no matter their organization, and our organizations don't work together because they're competing for members. So we, the people up here and the people in the individual counties, started talking to each other and said, you know, if they threaten you, we're all here with you. If they would try to punish one person, we are all together. They're not going to do a damn thing.
One thing that I can add to what she said as far as my end of the state, the one thing that really helped us was when we had our House of Delegate members, Mark Dean, Justin Markham, and especially Senator Ojeda, who came in and said, I support you 100%. When they saw those politicians coming out in support, that actually eased the tensions of everyone who had some sort of fear. You know, they realized they had people that were going to support them, they weren't going to lose their jobs, and let's face it, we have 727 vacancies. We are 48th in the nation. Who is going to replace it?
So we didn't, there weren't any official decisions made within the union itself as members until we took the strike authorization vote. The union, at the county level, the unions began holding meetings leading up to the strike, like in the weeks leading up to the strike, because they realized we had an emergency on our hands. Like, they called them emergency meetings. And eventually, really late, they held meetings together. So AFT and NEA held them together. And WVSSPA, yeah, all three. But it wasn't until we held that statewide strike authorization vote, you know, and we had to get a vote. Every single staff member who was not an administrator in each building took that yes or no. Do you authorize the unions to call a statewide work stoppage? We didn't use the word strike. That we took, you know, that we had like a formal decision-making process within the union, and that was very, very late in the game. But, you know, there were decisions being made in our schools. Once the strike, in the lead up to the strike, once it was clear, like, oh man, this might happen, and people were openly talking about politics and about, you know, this kind of action in the schools, people started making decisions on their own, and people started really stepping up. That came after the State of the State address, when the governor, actually there were four organizers, that held a banner at the State of the State address that said, I believe it said, public employee health care, not corporate welfare, fund PEIA now. And at the State of the State address, our governor called for a 1% raise for public employees. And the next day, in my teacher's lounge, everybody was suddenly talking about politics for the first time ever. And I think that a similar thing happened around the state. People were so angry. I think if the governor had not called for a 1% raise, we maybe would have never gone on strike. Like, that made people so mad, you know. Really, like, our healthcare keeps going up, and we've been asking you, and we've been showing up to these hearings. We've been saying we need our healthcare funded, and you're not going to do that, but you're going to give us a 1% raise. So anyway, that's not really the question. But at that point, people started, because we weren't really seeing anything from the unions at that point. People started making their own decisions about what to do within the schools and on Facebook, and those two things were kind of working together, right? So people started organizing. We're gonna all wear red on Fridays, and I don't know where that initially came from, but it just came from like a random, Oh, really? I don't know where it came from in West Virginia, like during this fight. I don't know what county, like who initiated that, but yeah, everybody's gonna wear red this Friday, and then it started in one school, and then they posted that to the Facebook group, and then all of a sudden every Friday every school was wearing red. Yeah, and so those sorts of like leaders, organic leaders, just sort of stepped up. Like I actually became co-building rep in my school like 3 weeks before the strike. Yeah, because we have a really big school, and there just was so much work to be done, and we didn't really have the other union ours anyway. We needed one, so yeah, that happened.
Brendan, I'm from Monogalia County in the north. It's where WVU is located. A walk-in is where you have teachers, staff, support personnel all outside the school in solidarity at once. So we would have ours like 20 or 30 minutes before school started. So as parents were dropping kids off, as buses were rolling in, they would see the teachers, support staff, and everyone out there in the same color with banners and passing out literature and talking about what was about to happen, but more along the lines of support your teachers, we're here for you, we're here for the community, but we need your support. So the walk-in was sort of a preliminary to the possibility of a rolling walkout, and it was a way to sort of raise the community awareness for what was happening. So the rolling walkouts idea was this idea that because we have 55 counties in the state, and Charleston, where our capital is pretty inaccessible for people in the northern panhandle, which is about 4 hours away, or the eastern panhandle, which is roughly equidistant. So the idea for a rolling walkout was initially to have 5 counties go out, some in the north, some in the south, some in, so that you could have each of these different counties sending representatives to the state capital every single day, and you wouldn't have any one county being exhausted from the travel. And at this point, we were also afraid that the state attorney general would give us an injunction on the strikes. So we felt that this was a way to beat the injunction. If you have 5 counties going out on one day, as soon as they file the injunction, where you're back in school, then another 5 counties go. And you can't file a legal injunction against us until we've done something quote unquote unlawful or illegal. Okay, so the idea was a rolling walkout was a way to beat the injunction and to make sure those counties were fresh. The idea of a rolling walkout, however, and I'll speak from my experience though, from what I witnessed in Mon County, a lot of the teachers I talked to were veteran teachers, and 28 years before this strike, there was another statewide strike where 47 counties in West Virginia of the 55 went on strike for, I think it was 7 days, and the veteran teachers at the school said, if you guys go on rolling walkouts, you're not going to get everything you want, because what are 5 counties going to do? It's an inconvenience for a day for that county, okay? They can absorb that. It has to be every single county. And the veteran teachers were telling us, you have technology that we didn't have in 1990. We had to do phone banks. We had to make sure we had physical lists of people who were preparing to go on strike. We had to make sure we had a roster, a phone tree. You guys have a Facebook group. You can instantaneously communicate with people. It needs to be a statewide action or it will not work. And so I think the idea of a rolling walkout was good legally in the beginning, and it was a way to make some of the teachers who were a bit more hesitant to feel like they had support outside of their county. But I think eventually people realized it wouldn't be effective. We wouldn't get everything we wanted if we only did the rolling walkouts.
I just want to quickly address the injunction thing before we move on. So that was a concern because we were told that not only state leadership but county leadership could be thrown in jail. Which I stepped up to be vice president, and I have 4 small children. They're all 6 and below. And my husband was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Somebody's got to do it." But, really unexpected and amazing happened that squashed the whole injunction issue. We were able to communicate with our superintendents. Each county has its own school board and superintendent. And I think that the superintendents and the principals and even the state superintendent realized that our issues are their issues and they wanted to stand behind us. So we had a meeting locally before we went out, and our superintendent came, and she, in a roundabout way, said, I'm not going to be filing any injunctions. And so I think having that communication with our school board and having the understanding that, you know, they're just as screwed as we are, and especially if they make us angry and we don't do our job or do what we need to do. So that was one way that those injunctions were completely wiped off the table, weren't even a concern anymore, was that communication with our school boards.
As to what happened before we actually went out, okay? We have 2 counties out, which I spoke to you about earlier. Wyoming followed us, which was Mingo. So we had the 2 for Fed Up Friday. So the next thing I know, the neighboring county of Logan, they say they're having a meeting. They're going to discuss whether or not they're going with us on Fed Up Friday. So they had the same people come, they had the same senators, they had various union representatives there, and I could tell that their local president was not really in favor of this. So all these people are here, they're all angry, they're wanting to go with us, and their officers just really weren't showing any type of support. Not all of them, maybe 1 or 2, but anyway, come to find out, one of the reasons why they were so afraid was because our governor, Jim Justice, he has a lobbyist who works for him, making between $500,000 and $1 million a year, that is the president of their local board there in Logan County by the name of Paul Hardesty. Okay? So anyway, finally they sit there and, you know, they're going back and forth, people trying to talk them down from going with us, saying, you know, we're only going to make the 3rd county. And I reminded them that I think it was Monogalia County that had went out several years ago just for 1 or 2 days, and they had actually caused us to get a $2,000 on the year raise just by that one county. So I said, if we have 3 counties, how much can we do then, even if it's 3? Okay? So finally, I stand up and I say that, and I pretty much say, you guys make the vote. These people up here have to do what you tell them to do. And then shortly thereafter, I was told, stick to your own county. Okay? So, shortly thereafter, the governor calls up his buddy, who is the board president in Logan, and he tells him, we need to have a meeting. So every school principal in the county of Logan receives a phone call that they are to send a faculty senate chair, a level-headed teacher, a level-headed service personnel member, and they tell them nothing about why they are to be sent to this meeting. They don't tell them that the governor's coming. They give no explanation whatsoever. They just say, be there. Okay, so the day before the meeting, I start getting secret phone calls. The governor's planning on coming to Logan. Governor's coming to Logan. So I call around to various unnamed individuals, and they say, yeah, he's coming. They don't want you to know he's coming, but he's coming. So I get on Facebook immediately, and I post, rumor is, Jim Justice is coming to Logan tomorrow, and he wants 3 level-headed individuals from each school, and it is a secret meeting. Okay, so I do this at around 9:00 p.m. the night before, and he was scheduled to be there at 11 the next day. Okay, so I put it on 3 pages. I put it on mine, I put it on the Logan County page, and I put it on the West Virginia Public Employees page, which was, okay. So within a few minutes, it's gone from the Logan page, and I get a message from one of the ladies there saying, you can't say that. We're trying to negotiate. You don't know, that's just rumor. You can't do that. So it's gone. Within a few minutes, this lady comes on under the other West Virginia page and says, you're endangering the governor's life, even if he's there. You shouldn't be telling him to do that. Okay. So that one gets removed, and then I'm the only one left out there. Immediately, I get a call saying, you've got the people at the governor's office torn all to pieces. They don't know what to think. They're scrambling to get together and make a press release saying that they're coming to Logan tomorrow. So, it gets announced early that morning at 9 o'clock before the meeting takes place at 11 or 11:30. So, Mr. Hardesty, the board president, he decides to get up while the governor's in the room with these level-headed individuals. And he says, I don't really have Facebook, ladies and gentlemen, but he said, Mr. Wolford from Mingo County has said that this meeting was to take place in secret, and I'm paraphrasing. Look at me, people. I'm 6 foot something, 300 and some pounds, nothing about me secret. And I'm thinking, not now that you got called out, it's not. So, needless to say, I got back on Facebook and I said, thank you, Mr. Hardesty, for the shout out. Someone who has Facebook, please show him and give him my my regards for giving me that shout out. Always give credit where credit is due. If you would like to join my union, please message me and I will get you the form.
Yeah, actually, right before the strike, we had a Martin Luther King Jr. Day rally, and the vice chair of the Education Committee, Joe Statler, one of the more conservative members in the House of Delegates, was basically saying, well, I want to basically just gut all these corporate property taxes, because I want a new Amazon facility here in southern West Virginia, which is economically devastated after a post-industrial move away from coal and everything. And so he said, I want a new Amazon facility in southern West Virginia. So I spoke up and said, do you know what they do to their workers? Do you know how they treat their workers? Do you know how much we're going to lose in tax revenue if we do this for this weird venture? And so from the very beginning, when we talked with our legislators, we said, you are devastating these communities, and if we have to take action, we're taking action because of the inefficiencies of what you've done. So in Monogalia County, I actually had the privilege of organizing a food drive for our county. Now our county has something like 20%, I think, of students on free and reduced lunches. This is one of the more populous counties in the state. This is where West Virginia University is. And what we had to do was pretty much coordinate with building reps from either WVEA or AFT in literally every single school, elementary school, middle school, high school, and say, what are your food pantries like? What do you have in the way of like a backpack program? Because when the walkouts were announced, we had about 3 days and part of the weekend to prepare for this. So I made a post on our Facebook page and said, we need donations from the communities because these are the numbers. We need to make sure these kids are fed because none of us knew how long this was going to last. We were preparing for a 2-day walkout on Thursday and Friday. And the outpouring of community support just overwhelmed us. And so what I did was I met with building reps at a central location after they had received food a few days prior. We took it to my high school and we pretty much had all the teacher aides pretty much go, and we had sort of an assembly line process where they would take a few things for breakfast bags, put it in a bag, roll it up, and put it in the corner. And we had something like 500 bags for breakfast and lunches that we then took to the County Board of Education to donate and then distribute from a central location. So what we tried to do from the very beginning was to show that the unions, the associations, and especially the rank and file members were not here to hurt the kids. We were not here to hurt the families that we serve every single day. We were trying to make sure they understood we're here for you. And as soon as we made this call out, I started contacting local news agencies and did some interviews with them, because I knew that this isn't just going to be a physical campaign where you have to make sure those communities get what they want. You're waging a media campaign, you're waging a PR campaign. You have to make sure that those communities understand that you're on their side, and you have to access them through the media that they have. So I tried to do several interviews. I know some of our county presidents did some interviews, and that way we got the message out that we're here for the kids, and this is tangible proof of what we're trying to do.
A similar situation in our county. All of our people pulled together for meals for the students. But in the meantime, one thing that I think we need to note is our president of the Senate, Mitch Carmichael, he's trying to pit the public against us. And he gets on television and he says, basically paraphrasing again, shame on these teachers. They are depriving our students, most of whom are depending on this meal that they get once or twice per day, and now they're not going to get it because they're out on strike. So I said, Mitch Carmichael, where are you on spring break? Where are you all summer? How many children do you feed? I mean, it was ridiculous. And he's smiling and trying to act like he's on their side. What was the point? What was the purpose in that? If you're not worried about them the rest of the time, why are you worried about these 2 or 3 days here and there that we're out on strike? It was just an attempt to try to pit them against us. And we had that over and over. We saw that time and time again from the Republican legislature at the state level.
Because of the PR, though, I was going to say, you know, we're pretty humble people, and so we don't necessarily want, you know, to brag about the things that we're doing. And it wasn't that we were bragging about giving the kids food. It felt like it at times, because we were trying to promote it on social media, because we were asking, you know, the media to cover the things that we were doing, but we realized we had to, because otherwise, you know, we were playing politics. And so it wasn't that we were feeding the kids to get the good recognition from it, and so we could say to Mitch Carmichael's of the world of West Virginia, it wasn't so we could say to them, hey, look at what we're doing. It was just, this is what we're doing. We need to let people know so that way they don't come back and bite us. Also, I wanted to say, it was during the strike, but we had an older woman, well, I got in trouble for saying older last time, a veteran teacher who worked at our school. She's still younger at heart than I am. But she couldn't come out to the Capitol every day, and she didn't want to stand on the picket lines, understandably. And so what she did was, her service to the strike was to go to our low poverty areas of the where we get our students every single day, and provide them food and provide them activities and give them things to do. So that way, I was talking with some people earlier about leadership and how we get leaders within the unions, and that was her pride in this. No, she wouldn't email. She doesn't know what email is. She doesn't know what Facebook is. But that was her offering, was to be able to give back through food and through activities for the kids while they were on break.
So if you hopefully find yourself in a situation of action, and that is a concern, that food is a concern for your students, all you have to do is make a phone call. People in every single community are willing to help. So you can reach out to service organizations, to religious institutions, to houses of worship, whatever you may have, and you can tell them, this is what we need, can you help me? And a lot of times those groups will work together independently without you having to guide them through every step. I live in a small town called Athens, and there's a university there called Concord University. And there's probably 4 churches in the community, and they took turns serving hot meals to children and adults. And they shared it, we shared it, the information, and that way it wasn't too much of a burden on one congregation, and they were able to share it around. So anytime that you need help or advice or anything like that, your first step is always just to ask, to reach out to someone and say, can you do this?
We've been out on the steps because actually NBC News was going to do a live broadcast, so actually all the teachers are already out there, and we knew that the union leaders had been meeting for hours with the governor in his office, and as we've talked about social media and things the whole time, people are checking their phones knowing that that meeting's supposed to be over while we're on the steps, and so we kind of get the news release from our phones before we hear it in person out on the steps, which gave us about 10 or 15 minutes to chew on it and kind of think about it. So when they come out and declare it's over, 5% raise, we'll have, and this is probably where they messed up, we'll have a PEIA task force to look at it. What you're saying. A little stronger words. I was standing on the steps and was just kind of in awe hearing everybody saying, back to the table, we are the union bosses, just So that was Tuesday night, and so Wednesday, they said Wednesday's a cooling off day, go back to school on Thursday. So Wednesday, we're all at the Capitol again. It's actually chaos. No one knows what's going on. There's a rumor the governor resigned. It was so strong he had to put on his Twitter, he had to put out, I've not resigned. No one knew what's going on, but the cool thing was, county by county, you just saw people calling meetings saying, no, we need to meet. And people knew, look, we can't trust them. They haven't signed this bill. There's no way. At the Capitol that morning, people in the House of Delegates were saying, we haven't even seen the bill. We'd love to sign it and support you, but it hasn't even come to us yet. So we all started to know, we don't trust this. And so I know in our county, in Charleston, we called a meeting. We just walked down to a church that let us use their auditorium and basically called for another vote and said, we're not going back until the bill is signed by both houses, by the governor, and until we see this task force thing in writing and know that it's real. And I think that was kind of copied statewide on that.
In the midst of all this, the governor has the audacity to look at us and say, don't be dumb bunnies, trust me. Okay, so we have people showing up on the steps in bunny costumes. And it was insult after insult. He even went to one county, and I'm not sure which one it is, and he looks at him and he says, now I can get just as redneck as the rest of you can. When everybody they were showing such opposition, and he just kept spouting out all these things and it was just making it even worse. So finally he got to the point to where he didn't have any other choice but to be on our side.
For practical advice to everyone here as well, the benefit of our secret Facebook group was the democratizing of information, because that Wednesday, I believe it was that Wednesday morning, there was talk that the Senate President, Mitch McCormick, said, I'm not going to even look at this bill. I'm not going to bring it to the floor. Good luck. I can't remember where it spread, but initially, I saw it, and I managed the West Virginia IWW Facebook page also, and so I tried to weaponize that information. I said, look, Mitch Carmichael saying he's not even going to look at this. So if we go back, what are we going to get? So I realized, and I think a lot of us realized, that the information that we have in the secret Facebook group cannot just remain in our private collective. We have to find ways to weaponize it to help advance our cause. And so I saw it had over like 100,000, 200,000 views because people started tagging friends in it. They started sharing it. I saw this on state senators' Facebook pages saying this other union, the IWW, saying that that Ms. Carmichael's not going to look at this. What do you know about this? And so this started getting shared rapidly. And it was part of the discourse, along with the fact that every single county was having these meetings. Even my county, this county superintendent called early in the day and said, "I'm proud to announce we're going to have people back on Thursday." And then he had to call back at 10:30 and say, yeah, about that. Teachers are still pissed. We don't know when we're going back. So, state legislature, get your act together. But the reason why I bring up that story is if anyone has to go in any sort of action, using your secret groups to weaponize that information to sort of democratize it and then send it out in very strategic times at very strategic locations with strategic people, and then that way you can democratize the information from your small group to the public at large and get them on your side as well.
I just want to say one quick thing about the night that we all decided to wildcat. So there are 55 counties, 55 strong, in West Virginia, and someone had brought up this little geography test map they had taken. They put it on Facebook, and as the counties started closing down, they started coloring them in. And I think the last county was a central northern county, and it was in Hampshire, and it was sometime at 10 o'clock at night that it closed down. But I have to tell you that I'm 32, and in my 32 years, I don't remember something as exciting as sitting there watching and continually updating to see, oh my God, there's 5 left. Oh, there's 4 left. And we were all like that. And then one of the chants that people said at the Capitol is it was not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 55 are at your door. And I could hear it. I could hear it going on.
I want to add to what Nicole said. We were watching the map hoping that counties would close because, the schools closing meant that, the days would get made up. It meant that we could go to the Capitol. It meant that there wouldn't be real picket lines. But we were going to go out either way. So we had a plan in place for real picket lines, which meant that we would have to be there at 4 a.m. when the earliest cooks would get there, and we would have to be there the entire day, and somebody would have to pick at the bus garages, and that luckily did not happen, but I was a nervous wreck that Wednesday, waiting the entire day, are we gonna have a real picket line tomorrow? And I think people around the state felt like that was the only day that I really thought maybe we're gonna have real picket lines. Oh, and the service personnel were incredible. I'm convinced they're the reason that this strike was, that we didn't have real picket lines the next day, or really any day of the strike. They were amazing. The messages that our superintendents kept getting, and our superintendents were great, and they should get recognition for this, but one of the reasons maybe they were as supportive as they were, and they closed schools as quickly as they did, is that they kept getting calls from the president of the West Virginia School Service Personnel, those county presidents, saying, the buses will not run tomorrow.
This is what I did in my county to anyone in here who plans on going out on strike, work stoppage, whatsoever. If it comes to the point that your superintendents do not close schools and you have people who are crossing the picket lines and you have those who, like myself, depend on the income from the school system 100%, as my wife is a teacher as well, there are options that you can present to them that would help them be able to survive financially if they were out 5, 10 to 15 days. And the way that I presented this to my people was through our local federal credit union. I spoke with the lady who was over that, and her name is Debbie Shepard, and she assured me that she would go and work overtime to make sure that anyone who was without a payday, that she would make sure that they would have that to make up financially, and then maybe just take out increments of 25 per payday once the strike was over. So those who are afraid financially, make sure that you have some kind of a plan like that. Go to someone, whether it be Federal Credit Union or whomever, and try your best to have a solution for those who are afraid to go out due to financial reasons. She responds, I just want to say one more thing on the pitting everyone against one another. They actually, since the governor promised us that 5%, Mitch Carmichael, who was very angry at us for what we were doing, he decides he's going to pit teachers against the rest of the public employees in the state. And he says, we're not giving them 5%, we're going to give them 4%. And the reason we're going to give them 4% is because the teachers don't need to get the 5%. We need to give them 4%, that way it equals out and it gives everyone here a 4% raise rather than just giving the teachers 5%. So he was once again trying to have them mad at us because we were supposedly getting that 1% more.
Yeah, so they tried divide and conquer tactics throughout the strike and throughout the lead up to the strike, and it did not work. I think that ultimately we were able to get a 5% raise for all public employees because this started as a fight for PEIA, which covers all public employees. And we weren't even talking about a raise initially. So yeah, I mean, that's how that came about. It was that there's a reason that our Facebook group was called West Virginia Public Employees United. Actually, when Jay first started it was West Virginia Teachers United, and then we said, we're fighting for PEIA, why don't we open this up to all public employees? This should be a fight for all public employees. Yeah. So, through all of our messaging, through the people we were bringing in, our friends that we were bringing in, the networks we were creating networks with public employees, but because teachers were, in a better position to go on strike because we have a higher number of unionized, members, right, workers, that's just what happened. I think public employees were really scared to go out and participate in really any kind of action, but in all of our messaging, we never forgot all of the public employees. We were all in it together, and we were not just public employees, though. We were looking at the state as a whole, and all of our media that we did, and all of the interviews that we did, and all of the all of our confrontations with our legislators, right? We were talking about the fact that these economic woes that we have, that teachers have, that school employees have, this is a result of years and years and years of exploitation, years of tax breaks to corporations and the wealthy that hurt all of West Virginia, right? And people got that on a fundamental level. Parents got that. Yeah, I think that's why we had such broad public support and why we were able to win it for public employees.
What are our next steps?
Rosetta for governor, right?
Yeah, and we had a few legislators who picked up on that narrative, right? Senator Rosetta. Our next steps, we are not finished. So a lot of people, the national media narrative is very much that we won and it's finished in West Virginia, but that's not true at all. We did not get our central demand met, which was for funding for our health care. So we are very much engaged in a fight right now around the PEIA task force. The governor appointed 29 members to that task force. We have a few friendly faces on it, so our union presidents are on it. We have one teacher on the task force, a retired teacher.
No, one active.
Yeah, there are no service, the president of the service personnel union is on it, but there are no actual service personnel.
You're not level-headed enough.
But there are multiple Republican legislators, and there are multiple insurance CEOs. Right? Yeah, who have openly talked about their plans to privatize our insurance.
Yep.
Yeah, so our next steps are to fight that. Yeah, and to wage a campaign, a targeted campaign for funding for PEIA through progressive revenue. Let's reverse those tax breaks to corporations.
You'll see where I'm going. Last summer, I found out about labor notes, and I became a subscriber, and I kind of thought, wow, this is really my people. Like, this is cool. I didn't know this existed. This is really amazing. And in the fall, even before these PIA hearings, I booked my hotel room here, and it's like, I'm coming to this conference, okay? None of this was even happening. So it's really weird to be standing here now talking to you. Just to let you know, you never know for the next one what may happen. And I'm being really serious, if we can do this, anybody can. Seriously. So the type of union I want to see is open, is truly democratic, open lines of communication with members, and one that, like we talked about, organizes, doesn't just mobilize people, really fights battles and really works for their members.
The type of union that I would like to see, and it is starting to get there in our county, is one that will stand not only against the state, but against the county. We have so many people who are in fear of retaliation at a county level that if they get a RIF, they get a transfer, any kind of problem that's going on, they're afraid to go before our local board. I mean, until here really recently, we have a good superintendent now who's a good, honest man, but before that, they were all state appointed. Most of them were crooks. And I mean, people could not go up there and voice their opinion without having those crooks coming after them. They would say things like, they would blame it on the state. If they decided to cut you, well, whenever you go to your grievance board hearing, well, the county didn't do it, the state did because you're under state control. We were under state control for several years. So now that we have accomplished what we have at the state level, I want to see our county level be as strong as the state was at the state level. I want our people to become more involved in the everyday process of decision making in our county rather than just sitting back. I want them to participate in the elections, worry about who we get voted in on our county boards, get to know these people personally to where you are not afraid to go in and voice your opinion with fear of retaliation.
I would like to see my union be not just a lobbying group, but a site of real organizing. Since I started teaching, I was a member of the union, but I didn't think about it very much. I wasn't very involved in the union until the strike, although I do have years of organizing experience, and I was doing other kinds of organizing. And through that organizing experience, because of that organizing experience, being involved in campaigns that were not at all related to the union, I went into this strike feeling prepared in a way. You can't really prepare for a strike, but prepared to do things like bird dogging or I don't know, and just how to lead a strategic escalated campaign to win something. And so I feel like if our unions actively engaged our members in fighting to win campaigns, with a goal in mind, and they train them in, tactics for how to do that, like we do when we organize for a public water system or Medicare for all or whatever. We would be, with that the institutional resources that we have, we would be so powerful, like we would take over the world.
So I would like to continue to see continue, because that's what we have been the past few months, is grassroots. What I truly loved about the whole process is there was no point in time when I felt like we were all on the same page. There were people saying, oh, well, we should do sick days. We should, walk out doing this. We should walk in. No, let's do, Fed Up Friday. But everybody was talking, and each county, each school took what they wanted to do, and they did it. And they posted about it. And it took that fear away from some of us and empower us to do what we wanted to do. And it also was a way of letting us be in charge. And I think that with Emily's tactic of teaching us the tools of how to really make something happen with a purpose, we really could go far beyond our wildest dreams. And so I hope to continue that and not get insulated in leadership and just say, okay, my neighbor who I might not particularly agree with has an idea, and I'm going to stick up for her because she's doing an awesome job and just doing something rather than just sitting back and hoping that something will happen one day.
First, I would just like to say thank you to everyone that made it possible for me to come to Labor Day. They asked me several times, and I was like, no, I just can't. And not because that I didn't want to, because I did. But like I said, I have 4 children, and those sick days go quickly. And so I didn't have the money, I didn't have the days off, I didn't have anything that I needed to be able to make it. And with the network of people that I've met, they were able to help me find the money. They were able to waive fees and do everything else. So I'm so thankful. So thank everyone that helped me. Thank you. But I decided that I would run for our local president. And I won. And kind of in the vein, real quick, not to get off topic, but I have 4 small kids. Like, I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 19-month-old, because I adopted the youngest one through the foster care system. So if I can be active, if I can do things. But my vision, of course, is for us to work on a caucus and for that caucus to be as inclusive as possible. But it also, at the local level, I want to help people have ownership in our organization. I want them to bring their gifts, whatever they are, to bring their interests, to bring their concerns, to bring their hope, and be actively engaged. And so I'm hoping that I can facilitate that, not only by trying to have more face-to-face conversations and inviting as many people as we can to be active, but to also give them their own space, their own outlet to be their own group, whether it be a Black caucus or an early educators or our service professionals, which keep our schools alive. Please never forget that. They do. So that is my hope. that we can be more inclusive, more transparent, and that we can give everyone the space they need to thrive within the union.
I'll finish my remarks with two very brief stories. The lead up to the governor's race. Is it working? Okay. Lead up to the governor's race in 2016, there were two Democratic candidates. Two are the more important ones. The first one was Jeff Kessler. Jeff Kessler was endorsed by Bernie Sanders. He was very progressive, probably the most progressive Democrat in the state of West Virginia. The other was Jim Justice, who never held a single governmental official job in his entire life. Wealthiest man in West Virginia, and that's not hyperbole. And the education unions, both AFT and WVEA, both endorsed Jim Justice. And the reason was, Jim Justice is a billionaire. Jim Justice can fund his own campaign. He doesn't need our money. So, Jim Justice won the primary. Then Jim Justice went against a guy named Bill Cole, who was also backed by the coal lobby. Jim Justice won, you know the story. And I remember seeing Jim Justice come, talk about he was a friend of education, he was going to help us, and then a few months later, became a Republican, and all of that stuff went out the window. And for me, the thing that upset me most was we were so concerned with making sure Jim Justice got elected, and we were so grateful we had a Democrat in the governor's office after this, that we completely miscalculated the fact that we could have endorsed, maybe lost, but we would have at least had the public support of endorsing a progressive Democrat, because the Democratic Party in West Virginia is just as conservative as the Republican Party in many ways. And I was very upset at the fact that what we had become, or at least the perception was, we were simply the educational lobbying arm of the Democratic Party.
That's right.
And I did not want to see that happen when the Democrats who we were trying to elect seemed to be roughly similar in terms of economics, in terms of healthcare, everything with the Republicans. So the first thing that I was upset about was that. But the second thing I see going forward is this. The CWA was on strike around the same time, like right at the end of our strike, the CWA went on strike too. And I remember going on a picket line with CWA members in Charleston, in the Capitol. And I was talking with someone and he said, listen, I wake up really early and I go and I install high-speed internet cables out in places in West Virginia that have no access whatsoever to the outside world. There are kids there who will now have high-quality, high-speed internet because of what we do. They will now have cell phone coverage because of what we do. These are now schools that can connect high-speed, quality internet. They can have one-on-one technology. They can know that there's a world out there beyond their local community because of what we do, and yet we cannot do it because we don't have job security. And for me, I want us to live the idea that an injury to one is an injury to all. That if you see communication workers going on strike, you support them in whatever way you can because they're going to help your communities. You see United Steelworkers, a local plant right near my house, are going on strike right at the end of our strike too. You see going on strike, you go out there and you support them because an injury to one is an injury to all, and I want to see our unions going forward actually practice this.